Afternoon. I would like to call to order the work session of the Norfolk School Board for Wednesday, September 3rd. I welcome each of you present this afternoon. A quorum is present to transact the business of the school division. Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Basine.
Here.
Buffalo.
Here.
Inge.
Present.
Paulson.
Present.
Calagero.
Present. We will begin today's meeting with our school board student representatives swearing in ceremony. Board members and student representatives, please join me at the backdrop and podium.
You right here, and then you right there. Board members, let me get your line up right
Dr. Poe, you want?
here. Like this? Okay. Yeah, kind of like, yeah, there you go. So we can get the picture.
You all right?
Where do you want me, Karen? Just kind of back here?
Yeah. Okay, y'all. Can you see everybody now?
No, they need to get a little closer.
No, this is kind of lopsided here.
Okay, I think
Mary
I'm
Ann,
gonna
you
do
sure
you
you want to be
first.
on the side with all the guys?
And then, Mary Ann, you can stand right here.
I can now.
I'm gonna do you separately.
There we go.
All right, awesome, awesome. Are the parents of these lovely ladies here today? Could you please stand? Good to see you. Give them a round of applause. I want to thank you all for allowing us to enjoy the presence of your daughters here serving as student school board representatives for the Norfolk School Board for this school year. And you're welcome to come up and take pictures as we do this as well. So we're going to start with you, Athena. All right. We'll make this very simple because I know it can seem complex repeating after somebody. Could you hold on to that? All right. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
and that I will
and that I will
faithfully
faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge
discharge
and perform all duties
and perform all duties
incumbent upon me
incumbent upon me
as the student representative
as the student representative
of the School Board of the City of Norfolk
of the School Board of the City of Norfolk
for a term beginning
for a term beginning
September 3rd, 2025,
September 3rd, 2025,
and expiring
and expiring
May 20th,
May 20th,
2026,
2026,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Wonderful. And I'll get you to sign. And then Dr. Pohl, you come over and sign too. And you'll sign both. One is a copy for you and one is a copy for us.
You have such a fancy signature. Oh, thank you. Mine's a big hot mess. So. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And I will switch sides and give you this microphone here. All right. And raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
and that I will
and that I will
faithfully
faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge
discharge
and perform
all the duties
incumbent upon me
incumbent upon me
as the alternate
as the alternate
student representative
student representative
of the School Board of the City of Norfolk
School Board of the City of Norfolk
for a term beginning
for a term beginning
September 3rd, 2025,
September 3rd, 2025,
and expiring
and expiring
May 20th,
May 20th,
2026,
2026,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my
So
perspective.
help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
With your certificate, oaths of office. And then Dr. White is going to take a picture of you all.
Can we move in pretty close?
You want all of us in? Okay.
Yeah, all of you win.
Yeah, is that good?
Let's give them a round of applause.
Let's take a few minutes so they can get pictures with their parents and help themselves to any refreshments. You can keep, I'll give these to Karen. So get it. item is 3.01, discussion of superintendent qualifications. Posted on board docs and sent to the board members over the weekend was a draft. Oh, we out of
Yeah,
order?
it's the other way. Consolidation is first.
Okay. It is.
Yeah, 3.01.
They were switched during agenda planning. We must have just switched them. Okay. We now move on to 3.01, discussion of school closures and consolidations with David Sturts from Woolpert. Please come forward.
So as Mr. Sturts is coming forward, I'd like to just make a statement. This afternoon, we begin a very important discussion, one that will shape the entire footprint of elementary education in Norfolk Public Schools. The consolidation of schools is not something we approach lightly. It has been studied carefully, informed by data, and most importantly, guided by the voices of our community. The board will consider 4 options this evening. The first option comes directly from the Facilities Planning Committee. The other 3 options were developed by incorporating community feedback. To ensure full transparency, all community input has been posted publicly in its raw form for anyone to review. Following the consideration of the 4 options, it's also possible the board may create a 5th option if needed. The administration is here to support this conversation in any way possible. As we all know, our community has also asked the decision be made so that we can begin to look forward. Mr. Sturts will cover the details of each option, but I wanted to highlight a few key points. Option 2 and 3 propose the same building closures but on different timelines, allowing for additional planning time for certain schools with the alignment of potential city council funding for rebuilds. Option 4, which reflects much of the feedback we receive, keeps Ghent School open and allows Monroe students to remain in their building, relocates PB Young students to Jaycox instead of Ruffner, and moves Lindenwood students to Monroe rather than Jaycox. While this option is responsive to the community, it presents challenges in accommodating our pre-K and self-contained classes with our current enrollment numbers. That said, as enrollment continues to decline, more space will gradually become available at Willard, and Willard remains an option for additional classroom space that may be needed. Option 4 only closes 9 buildings and only 8 of them if one is kept for professional development. For context, our total 10-day count enrollment declined by 171 students from school year 24 to 25, and by 671 students from last year to this year. So I want to repeat that again. In our total 10-day count enrollment, K-12 decreased by 671 students right now from last year's 10-day count to this year's 10-day count. At the elementary level alone this year, there was a reduction of 189 students from last year's 10-day count to this year's 10-day count. I think those are important numbers to know. Today's day 11, so we're fortunate enough to have our 10-day count. This enrollment trend underscores the reality that Norfolk Public Schools has an abundance of buildings. This decision is not simply about closing buildings, it's about creating opportunity, an opportunity to redesign how we place resources, to align Title I and other support funds more directly with student needs, and to create schools of reasonable size that offer increased opportunities for all of our students. Once a final vote is achieved, the administration has prepared a list of assurances to guide the process of creating new attendance zones, planning for student movement, and ultimately closing buildings. These posted assurances demonstrate that the community's voice has been heard, and they are designed to make these major changes as smooth as possible. Depending on the final decision, additional assurances may be added before the scheduled vote at the next board meeting. By making them public, we hold both the administration and the board accountable to the community throughout this transition. Although tonight's discussion is about ensuring that every child in Norfolk has access to the strongest possible education in schools designed to serve them well into the future, this is also only the beginning of this major transition. As we implement the plan, we will continue to revisit enrollment numbers and building usage, ensuring that future generations do not face the changes of this magnitude again. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to present this work, and I'll now turn the presentation over to Mr. Sturts.
Thank you, Dr. Pohl. Members of the board, newest members of the board, congratulations. It's good to be with you as always, and I appreciate Dr. Pohl's introduction, and I do very much consider this kind of work hard and an honor. to be a part of in doing work that matters with your community and with you all and this school division and leadership. And I look forward to supporting the focus on the reinvestment to follow this and implementing in that positive backside of how we're going to, as a division, how you're going to, as a division, reinvest in your kids and turn the focus there. So, but for tonight, what I'm going to do is present a summary of the community meeting information. This is in summary form. Both the summaries and the raw data have been posted for Dr. Pohl's comments. I wanted to discuss those sequencing options that Dr. Pohl teed up. Measure twice, cut once is what my carpenter grandfather said. And so we have gone back and looked at those schools that are scheduled for receiving consolidated schools and re-verified capacities. And we are within 2% of the capacities used, so we're confident that I'll go over that school by school. Then we go into a myriad of different student and teacher data points as comparisons as when you are making transitions, whatever plan ultimately or hybrid plan that you as a board adopt. These are data points that you can use to help navigate those next transitions and discussions. One of those key ones will be redistricting, which I tee up at the very end, a broad scope and sequence as discussed and agreed upon with administration. Should you proceed with a plan of this nature, we have an outline for what a recommended redistricting plan would be. As always, happy to entertain questions as we go or at the end, whatever suits your fancy. So, get into it. So this is the exact slide that I teed up for our summer group meetings in June and August, I want to say. And so first is just I ask all the attendees to review the potential consolidation lists and to review the core planning criteria that were used to create it, which is we want world-class schools for every kid every day. And we want to look at the building's conditions. We want to maximize the direct investments in students, which means we need to be effective and efficient in our operations as a division. Accessible to where students are, which were measured, approximated based upon student population densities. And that to account for all three of those things, the general rule was we need newer and fewer schools in Norfolk Public Schools. Went over with all of that data on with your community and the conditions and the like. So there were two questions that framed this. One, do you have alternative suggestions for consolidating, renovating, and rebuilding that aligns with the core planning criteria? And two, what would you like the Board of Ed and City Council to consider when implementing a plan of this nature? And as you may have heard directly or inferred, a lot of the comments were words of caution and concern and, yes, hope for what lies next. And so the way that I'm summarizing it for you today is high level on the overall feedback and then getting into individual responses to the main categories of feedback that I saw and what I think a general path forward accordingly would be. One, if I were to boil it all down into a unifying theme that I heard in my own ears in reading through all of the comments and sifting through them, is that there's a desire to invest equitably and adequately in public school buildings, programs, teachers, and their communities. It is not rocket science. It is, we want an accessible school in good condition. We want you to invest in it. And the opposite is true. We do not want divestment to be inequitable, to be burdensome for any one community. We want a good plan. The four main buckets that I heard and observed in the comments, a lot of them, and this is in no particular order, but a lot had to do with transportation. And, you know, I've done this work for a bit, and bus rides and hot meals and caring teachers.
Absolutely.
Those are three, that's it. That's most of the ball game right there. Reliable transportation, safe transportation, accessible schools, accessible transportation, and then other stuff. We didn't get into operations on the meals and teachers, but that's for another day. But desire for more predictable, shorter bus rides. Concern, of course, that, hey, if we do a consolidation plan, does that mean longer bus rides? And I'll get into that in a little bit. And then preserving walkability for students when possible and improving pedestrian safety zones was something that was put up. Diversity, desire to promote diversity and community cohesion. Concern that a boundary process to follow this may concentrate poverty. Be wary of that. Maintaining diversity across schools and not disproportionately challenging underserved populations. Community concerns, desire to invest in communities, concern about school closures' impact on walkability, which relates to the other, transportation. Specific concerns regarding Ghent and Monroe. It would be disingenuous of me not to put those out because we heard a little bit about those in the community meetings. Redistricting, a desire to explore redistricting as a way to better distribute enrollment to capacity. This came up a lot, and it always comes a lot. Can we just redistrict rather than close? And when you have two schools in imbalance, yes. When you have a division in imbalance, no. Because the denominator stays the same, right? The ratios stay the same. So you think about, and these are in my words in a response to that, that many of the comments and conversations at the meetings that I heard reflect there's a broad understanding that change needs to happen and change is desired. But they want to see your plans for exactly how that will be implemented. They want to be a part of that. Not just see your plans, but be a part of the planning. And that, I think, is the broader message is, yes, change needs to occur. Let us be a part of it with you. Please don't do this behind our backs. We can be trusted to do this work with you. Transportation. Now, these are my responses. Some students will be closer to their schools through a plan of this nature. Just the way, again, buildings don't move, populations do. The boundaries, the way that they're drawn. Some students will be closer. Some will be further. It's just that's the way it goes. You will have some who are closer to the school, some not. That redistricting and the reduction in schools should reduce the total number of bus routes themselves while increasing the number of students on those buses, increasing your efficiency, which is part of the challenge in that you have with not enough bus drivers and so many routes and buses that aren't completely full. You are going to so many different places, moving so many different kids in so many directions. So we're sort of reducing the overall load. Now, the consolidation plan of this nature can absolutely help you be more efficient in transportation. The boundary process has to support that. And that's one of those next steps. Now, I bring that up in this order because the next category of the conversation about diversity is similar. Some reductions provide the opportunity directly for increasing student population diversities at the elementary level, which is the target of focus of these consolidations. Though not every consolidation by itself can do so, because you as a school division did not create economic or ethnic segregation in your town, you inhabit it. School divisions didn't make that, school divisions inhabit it. And so the consolidation plan can, on the net, increase your diversity, in some cases substantially so in individual school consolidations. Not every single one as proposed will by itself at this time, can I say in good faith, would. And I'd say that because that's how your town is divided. So it is an eyes wide open kind of thing, and that's why I put the data in the back, which we'll go over in a minute. It shows very clearly where, as the proposed consolidations, what those impacts are probably. With a big asterisk, when you change boundaries and change who attends what school, the numbers change, right? So these numbers will vary a little bit, so consider them order of magnitude. And increases in diversity will be sometimes in tension, not always, but sometimes in tension with increases in efficiency of transportation when you get to redistricting. So those are part of the balancing act, which is why that needs to be a robust process unto itself to support your master plan, because it's a big lift. The community, as I inferred earlier, wants to continue engaging through the steering committee and through community meetings to help guide and inform your implementation of the plan. And redistricting, again, prior to consolidation would not change the overall imbalance, but it is vital to ensure schools at the end of the day are accessible and efficiently operated. So these are narrative summaries of all of the individual comments per what I share with you is a summary of all of the responses. Now I'm breaking them down by Q1 and Q2. Question 1, there weren't a ton of alternative suggestions thrown out there. There were a handful, and some of that's reflected. But most of these were echoing the same concerns between both questions. Asking, can we do rezoning first? And again, that's not going to solve the redistricting, the overall balance challenge that you have. And quite frankly, again, I think as I mentioned to you, if we would try to chase that, you would be creating multiple facility options with each multiple boundary options to support each multiple facility option. And that is a lot of coming up with myriads of different permutations of a plan that's a very high effort, and ultimately at the end of the day, where are your buildings relative to your students? And then we'll build a redistricting plan to support that in your communities and make sure schools are accessible. 2, the K-8 model came up quite a bit, and with 2 different general themes, both preserving it, i.e. Ghent, and concerns about it, i.e. Ruffner PP Young. Community impact and engagement. Feedback underscores the necessity of continuing engagement, transparency. Let's not hide, let's share, let's do this eyes wide open with our community. And again, I've praised your steering committee. They are professional. They are, I'm not saying that just because 2 of them are here, but they are very good, and please continue working with them. Resource allocation and facility prioritization. Want to know what your plans are for consolidations and plowing those savings back into students, directly in students. What is that directly? And as mentioned earlier, there was quite a lot of concerns about the Ghent to Monroe consolidation, primarily driven from those at Ghent and Monroe. So would you like to Norfolk Board and City Council to consider when implementing a plan of this nature, the 5 key buckets that I saw? Again, continue community engagement, equity, diversity, socioeconomic concerns, making sure that the resources are pushed to the need based on the data, and that is something that we in the steering committee and we and my team, by extension, in good faith, has endeavored to do. Program continuity and student support. Making sure programs that are successful stay successful and aren't just disbanded, and that's something that we did try to communicate, that what we're talking about is moving populations in buildings into different buildings and rebuilding buildings. We're not talking about, taking down programs that are successful. It's about moving to places for a long-term home where maybe it cannot be a long-term home today. Facilities, transportation, and safety, many of the things that I've already echoed there. Bus availability, traffic, transportation comes up a lot, as well as building conditions. And financial transparency and resource allocation, going back again to what is the plan, where the money to reinvest back in our kids. Want to be involved in that. So in summary, my response in looking at all of the comments and leading those meetings, getting to be a part of them, it's just a unifying theme to invest equitably and adequately in those buildings, programs, teachers, and communities. That we desire more, folks desire more predictable, shorter bus rides, concern about that possibly being challenged, preserving walkability, and all of the things we mentioned earlier, promoting diversity, wanting to be a part of the boundary work and knowing that a lot hinges on that boundary work being done well. and continuing to stay involved throughout the entire process. So that is my high-level summary of all of the feedback. I think I had a count written down, I want to say it was 336 in person who signed up at those community meetings, and I know some didn't, who attended who didn't sign up. Okay. So, sequencing options. Now, you have this in front of you. The option one was that preliminary sequence that was brought to the community this summer, and so it should not be a surprise. It's something that you've seen before. For the sake of everybody's patience, I'm not going to read every row of all these things. You're welcome, Tiffany. But what I will do is kind of hit like the highlight differences between them for your purposes. So option two, the major difference here is in looking at the options, quite honestly, you're going to need to take some pause years where you're just doing school design and looking at the probable reality of funding coming to you post the Maury, or while the Maury project is wrapping up in the coming years. I do think that option two is really quite frankly, probably a more realistic version of option one in terms of funding streams and timing. But it doesn't, so it changes the timing a little bit. It doesn't really change anything else of substance. It just changes the timing. And you see gap years in there for this school year being a division-wide redistricting plan and to begin making school transition plans, which it's always good to make a good plan ahead of action. I think this is the right year to do it. And then several years out, taking a year to design the J. Cox and Suburban Park rebuilds. So option two, plans for planning, if you will. Option three is a minor sequencing change on that, and that is, and there's a couple of these options that if you wanted to play with sequencing, you could change more, but it was just flipping PB Young and Lindenwood in terms of timing. There's not a one-way fit, a one-size-fits-all or one-way is best kind of strategy here. You could be a little bit flexible with some of these school consolidations, while the reason that they're grouped the way that they are have to do with trying to make sure as much as possible that when school transitions are made for schools, for students who will go into schools that are being rebuilt or built new, that they move once. We don't want to move them into a school and then move them out of the school when that school is being rebuilt and then move them back. The less transitions, generally the better, not always, but generally. Because what we'd like to do is, as Dr. Pohl alluded to, once this major change plan, if adopted, goes through, the desire would be on a regular, slower rebuilding cycle where you move kids into new buildings from old on a semi-regular basis. This is just trying to do it in mass, which is where some of the complications align. So it's phased out the way it is to accommodate the rebuilding processes when the funding would likely be available. Phase 4, option 4, not phase 4, option 4 is responding to calls and concerns about Ghent going to Monroe and also concerns about PB Young going to Jaycox. So here is a plan that reflects those concerns. And so it does keep Ghent where it is and merges the Lindenwood and Monroe populations and moves PB Young into Jaycox. Now, as Dr. Pohl mentioned, there are a few challenges with that. For example, Lindenwood going into Monroe. We are trying to target about an 85% ratio between enrollment and capacity because we don't want to overcrowd schools. We don't want to go from underutilized to overutilized. So the Lindenwood population, looking at the last year's population, not this year, but last year's, 239, Monroe 293, both small. Put them together, that's 532. Well, the capacity at Monroe is 563, which gets to a 95% utilization. What that means on a classroom-by-classroom basis is, and Mr. Fraley walked schools and re-verified all of the schools' room uses there, so many thanks to him for doing that. There are currently 7 pre-K classrooms at Monroe, 1 pre-K classroom at Lindenwood. Monroe has 26 total classrooms. They have 12 for grade level instruction, which is K to 5. And Lindenwood has 12 for grade level instruction, K to 5, meaning there would be 24 classrooms, and they're reasonably loaded. There are 18, 19 kids. It's not like there's 13 kids in every class. Which means there'd be 2 classrooms left over for flex use or something else, or pre-K, but there's 8 pre-K classrooms total between the 2 of them. So those 8 pre-K classrooms have to go somewhere else. And this is sort of that web of interdependencies that you pull, that makes some of this complicated. Now, could you deal with it? Sure. You find another home for 6 to 8 pre-K classrooms. Maybe they go up to Larchmont. Maybe they, because that was one of the plans with Monroe, is Monroe PK classrooms going to Larchmont. You could make options work, but it adds another complication to solve. Not impossible, but it adds a consideration. At minimum, I'd call it a consideration. Another one to consider is the PB Young to J. Cox. J. Cox has a capacity, and when we assessed it, I'll go over this in a minute, of 829 back in 2013. Field verifying based on how it's being used today was 787. So this kind of small percentage variation is natural year over year, okay? But just how the building's being used right now. So call it 787 to 829, it's about 800. The populations of the 2 schools combined is 829. So if you were going to put PB Young wholesale into J. Cox wholesale, you will need to do one of a couple things. You will need to activate portables in use. That needs some work there. You need to offload that school by bound through the redistricting process so that that total 829 student population, which is a little less this year, is even less because it's now dispersed to other schools. So solvable, but it's a challenge. And those are the kinds of challenges, which is why I didn't originally propose something of that in working, even after working with the steering committee and they're coming up with their options. So again, doable, it has a challenge.
I have the question.
Ma'am.
Option 4 does not necessarily move students into Larchmont unless we put pre-K into Larchmont?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Because they're only at 52% capacity, and it's a very new building.
So hence my suggestion, that is solvable. You can move pre-K into Larchmont, which was the plan, the idea for the Monroe. So it is doable.
And just the numbers, Monroe's capacity is what? He said Lindenwood was 239 and Monroe was,
Lindenwood, I'm talking about the enrollment, and Lindenwood
Enrollment.
was 239
And then-
official last year. Monroe was 293. That's a total of 532 into a Monroe capacity estimate at 563, which is 95% utilized.
but we know that Monroe is nowhere near 293 this year.
Well, and that also includes pre-K, the 293 number, so
That
Yeah, you
included
take out the
Monroe.
pre-K, and you're down to 100 and, what are we, Rick?
Monroe right now,
Yeah,
without pre-K, is at 206.
206.
So we're not looking at too much, if we take pre-K out of Monroe, we're not looking at too much capacity. We're not looking at pushing the capacity level.
Yeah, you take the pre-K out, that does help. It's solvable. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
So, and Mr. Fraley, the 206 is based on after the 10-day count, like as of right now?
Yesterday.
This year.
This was yesterday's count.
Okay, that's what so So what we had in the chart was from last year, so that's.
Yeah, the number, yeah. I like to use official enrollments from the year prior generally, but these are good sort of.
Yeah,
and-
there's quite a drop.
Yeah, and just a reminder, really, we try to use September 30 counts, but in this instant right now, of course, the 10-day count is what we're going to have to really rely on.
Right, yeah, that's why.
Yep.
It's quite a drop.
Yep.
Is there a scenario where in the first three options, PB Young goes to Ruffner, correct? I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
want to make sure I'm not getting my schools mixed
You're
up.
correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a scenario that incorporates one of the first three options where PB Young does not go to Ruffner? I mean, is it possible to not send those students? Because one of the concerns is the culture and climate at Ruffner right now, adding in a K2, because we're at 3.8. So is there any capacity in any of the first three options to not move PB Young into Ruffner and leaving Ruffner a 3.8 school? Because I see that option in option 4, but not really in options 1 through 3.
So I would say is, as Dr. Paul alluded to, you could make your own option.
Right.
As sort of a buffet of some of these. It comes, that can come with some challenges, but, to put it mildly, but you can. This PB Young to Jaycox could work, but you would need to offload the population of Jaycox to begin with, because you would overload the building if you did that. Furthermore, I would love to rebuild Jaycox yesterday, and it's already being pushed out. It needs a lot of work, and so pushing a bunch of students in there, knowing that it really needs work now, and then moving them out when you need to rebuild it, that's a lot of churn that I'd like to avoid, I think. And so I would say that there's always the just let it be option. You don't close it, right? If that's a big concern. There's also Ruffner building is sizable. Can you operate schools so that you mitigate any concerns in that respect? K-8s can work, and our research has borne that out, and we know that it can. Yeah, exactly. So maybe it just needs a little time to plan for what that looks like effectively. I really don't want to step too far outside my lane, but that's what considerations I would suggest.
And I would also, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, with a move of PB Young to Ruffner, it like the second or third phase of movement, we'll be able to add resources to Ruffner beyond even what PB Young has right now to support that kind of a transition, if that's where it goes. I think to look at options 1 through 3, look at the building closures that are included in all those options. In order to move PB Young not into Ruffner, we would have to do a lot of rezoning across the entire city and make movements, so we might end up having to split some of the Monroe and put them in Larchmont to be able to move, because then you have to look at some proximity too, so you don't have the long bus rides.
Right.
Yeah.
And Granby has one of the worst FCIs. Correct?
The worst FCI.
Yep. number
And
one.
we're still looking at not moving them until
We need a place for them.
2031.
And that is one of the real challenges is, you need to do all of this construction now.
Right.
But you don't have the funds for it. And so all this phasing is not ideal. There's not another way unless funding becomes available by another means. And so with that reality of funding likely not coming on a time frame any quicker than this, at least with what we know now, if we can avoid moving kids multiple times for one transition, that at least takes some of the sting out. Because we do know, and I am confident saying, that transitions are challenging for kids. Do they hurt kids? Well, you can always most kids bounce back. You see that in data.
I don't know if the adults bounce back as quickly as the kids.
They usually not. But it's, the more transitions we add, the more complicated and challenging, the more recoveries we have to do, and that we want to avoid that.
Okay. I just had those few questions, just, because option 4 to me seems like what people want, but I don't think it's very sustainable. From what I'm hearing and from what I've put together on my own, option 4 kind of quells the masses, but it doesn't necessarily solve our issues.
Opportunities, yeah.
Yes, sir. Tanya had a question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask, like, how you want to handle questions, because I know you have quite a bit of slides.
Yes, and actually, I apologize, I should not have asked so many questions.
Because I have a ton on the options too, but I also want you to be able to
Yes,
get
to
through
finish. So, Mr. N, do you want to quickly ask your question, and then
I
we'll,
want to let them go
we'll
through
go-
everything and then we'll reserve.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll wait, well, I will keep my mouth shut until then.
No worries at all. No worries. Okay, so in essence, we're looking at 10 years. Any way you slice it, we're looking at 10 years. It's how you sequence it, more or less. So I won't belabor the point there. Capacity confirmations, again, I'm going to breeze through this because it's basically your capacity as we assess it is within 2% today as it was using the data that we gathered back when I walked your schools for it in 2013. And this is natural variations of single-digit percentage and how schools are used over time is absolutely normal. So it gives us some confidence that the capacity numbers that we're using are solid. As I said, Mr. Fraley walked all these schools with the principals, marked them all out, aligned it with our study, including specials use, and we came up with that we're within 2%. I'm not going to go into this, but for more than maybe the first one, so you can just see the reference. Sherwood Forest capacity field verification in 2013, we counted 34 classrooms, 6 specials for a net of 28 capacity-giving classrooms at 22.5 students per room on average. That is 630 capacity. 2025 field verification, same total, 5 specialties, 29, a net capacity of 22 more kids. So, that's kind of how this goes, some up, some down by a tick, verified with how the rooms are actually being used. You also see some things like, hey, Little Creek had 47, now it has 45. That's because classrooms over time sometimes be repurposed for things other than classrooms for their administration. One of your schools has a planetarium. The classrooms get taken over for that. That's why you'll see any change in that respect. But I won't bore you with all the details. It's there for your review. Now, this, I'm going to take a minute to explain these considerations. Again, one of our charges was to look at student and teacher data comparisons between closing schools and those receiving schools where those kids would mix into, either in whole or in part with others. So I coded all of the schools by either closing or receiving. So if in option 1, the GET program picks all up and walks over to Monroe, nobody's receiving, nobody's closing. It's the population just has a new bricks and sticks, right? So this is more, schools merging into other populations. So on the net, there's most of the data here points are ones that you already track, the percent of teachers with less than one full-time year experience, percent of teachers with provisional licenses, percent of teachers without license or properly endorsed, total students, students by ethnicity, students with disabilities, English language learners, low socioeconomic status, and McKinney-Vento. 2024-25 reading and math passage rates on the SOLs, and percent of students with short and long-term suspensions, percent walkers, FCI of the building, and building age. So those are all the data points that we both had access to the data from, and were able to make these comparisons. There's one data point that I created, which is the top one, which is the total teacher FTEs per student. So I looked at the total teacher FTEs that you have, divide that by the student population of the school. This is a proxy for resources per student. It is very much a proxy because there's a lot more that goes into it, but at least in terms of teacher FTEs per student. And on the net, the receiving schools had more teachers per FTEs per student, which you would expect. They're a little bit larger. You see the enrollment sizes. On the average closing school is 337. The average receiving school is 478. A lot of the rest of the data is very similar on population because your population isn't that distinguished between closing schools and a receiving school. So your population is your population. Where there are some differences to note, walker percentages. The closing schools tend to be smaller, older, in poorer condition, which means they were smaller neighborhood elementary schools that are just physically smaller, and they're in poorer condition in many ways because they're a lot older, by and large. You see the average age 64 versus 49. Well, so you have a smaller population built around a smaller neighborhood. So your percentage of walkers goes up not only because of where the school is placed, but because the total population is lower, making the percentage of those who walk higher. So there's those are sort of what I would say the broad overall differences and similarities.
I just have a clarifying question so that we all
Yes.
understand what we're looking at, right? So you have the closing column, of data points, the receiving schools, like in this case, Larchmont and Willard.
Yeah.
This is as it currently stands.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, so one of my questions is going to be, did you look at what it's going to look like once they're integrated?
And so here's the challenge, and that's part of my note in the upper left.
Yeah.
All data is based on 2024-25 official data, official enrollments. Redistricting will ultimately impact all of these student statistics and some of the teachers following any transition, and we don't know what those are. And again, we would have to create dozens of different varieties to approximate what they could be in scenario 1A versus 1B versus 1C. And so think of this as information to guide your decisions. This is not, I would say, they're not the answers. There's no thing that prevents or is a slam dunk for an option necessarily in this data. They are good things to know to guide the next phases of the work, at least in terms of redistricting. I'm going to go over a couple of these of note, but not, again, hit all of them for time's sake, and you have them for reference. The first one, just because the first one is right here, it's Monroe in option 1, the 2, 3, the Monroe to Larchmont and Willard. So the average FTEs per student is 8.4 in last school year in Monroe, and it's 13.2 at Larchmont and 10.4 at Willard. So more significantly, and I would say significantly. And then you see the teacher statistics are similar, although I'd say that there's slightly more experienced and licensed teachers at the receiving schools. Total students, you see the differences there. The student populations, there's most similar. Well, there's differences there as well. You have Larchmont with a significantly lower Black population and a much higher white population, and then that is mitigated slightly at Willard, which just has a higher Hispanic population than the other two. You see the special identified student populations there, the differences, the reading passage rates, those differences. The walkers, again, not many kids walk to Willard, just where it is. That's just the nature of that school. It's higher. It's similar between Monroe and Larchmont, although Monroe is a little bit more. Again, noting the caveats I mentioned earlier. And then you look at the building data as well. You know, a 60% FCI versus a 20 and a 55. It's similar at Willard, much better at Larchmont for obvious reasons. Okay, I'm going to skip over just to a couple highlights for you, not to dive into too much. But when you look at things like St. Helena to Southside STEM, for example, or PB Young to Ruffner in data comparisons, do take caution because we're talking about elementary students being compared with middle school student data. And elementary schools, particularly PB Young into Ruffner, you're comparing, you know, a PK2 with a 3.8 as very different operations. And student suspensions are very different in a PK2 than a 3.8, for example, right? So just words of caution when looking at those comparisons. Another thing to note, Granby seems to go everywhere with loose. It's like, why does it have so many feeder schools? It has so many feeder schools in the plan because if you look in the bottom left and you look at its boundary, it is a long, skinny boundary that abuts several other schools that are right next to it. Hence, the populations for Granby are in many cases closer to other schools. And when you do redistrict and close that school, they're going to go in more than one place. So hence, there's so many different comparison points here. And I also included Lindenwood to Monroe in the back and PB Young to Jaycox comparisons when that alternative was created there. I am happy to go through as much of these details as you would like on these comparisons. I didn't want to assume I'm just going to read them all. I think that I'll sort of put the ball in your court to let me know what questions you may have of those. Hopefully oriented you well enough to be able to read and understand these comparisons. The redistricting process, and now we'll sort of close on my formal presentation and go back for Q&A discussion. The scope and sequencing of a redistricting process is laid out here in high level, and this is something that can be done in this coming school year and agreed to on principle with the administrations to proceed following your lead on the plan. First is to gather all of the most relevant current student data, much of which we already have in our possession, so that's fairly expedient. But then our team would create individual parcels for your entire division, rather than relying on your boundaries as they are, creating a grid of geographically relevant parcels that, when you can add them all up, would make logical boundaries given where people live and where natural boundaries are. So re-look at your district as a matrix of where families live and where geography dictates there are natural boundaries and what have you, at a fairly granular level so that we could piece them together with confidence. Create some draft boundary options, so our team will do that, and then review options with the with you all and the steering committee, receiving feedback from both you and the steering committee on those options, making any amendments, adjustments as necessary for that, then reviewing those options with the community, sending out a survey to accompany that, using the combination of the feedback to date to create draft recommendations to bring back to you. This is all a process that we can get done before the end of the school year. I would anticipate sometime in spring of '26, and then you can go into the new school year with a boundary plan. Now, with the boundary plan, as mentioned before, we don't want to move students more than once. And so the idea would be whatever plan that you ultimately adopt in whatever sequence, my team would build a set of boundary options to that plan in that sequence, knowing that sequences will change with capital funding availability. If you get money quicker, we could just accelerate the timeline, but the logic would stay, the sequence would stay the same. And then the boundaries would be set so that as you are creating the boundaries for the first options in the chute, you're creating them as they stand at the end of the plan, not how it would maybe be optimally in year one. Because again, we're talking about a 10-year plan. So if we created the boundaries for a school based on, in year 3, based on the year 3 population, well, in year 10, we have all these other pieces that fit together. We want to make sure that it fits together well. So the short, maybe a better way for me to have phrased this is, we will create an in-state boundary for your new portfolio of schools at the end of the day, when everything's done, 10 years from now. And then back from that, how you implement that year over year to follow the plan as funding becomes available. So knowing that when you create a boundary, it's going to stick. You're not going to have to do it again. And it's going to fit together as designed at the end. Not to add another layer of complication, but basic recommendation is that you revisit a plan like this every 5 years. So don't revisit it every year or you never have a plan. But if you revisit it about every 5 years, take another look at it, you could then make any possible adjustments before you would have any major impacts. So that would be my recommendation, both for next year on this and a sort of, well, there we go. Next year, the implementation plan, first begin consolidation and rebuilding per your plan as you adopt it. Redistricting plan next year to support the facilities identified for closure and reception. And then revisit the plan no more than every 3, really recommend every 5 on average. And that you, in the general sequence as we described before, involve your steering committee and community in this process. Let's create some data and some ideas, vet it with the steering committee, vet it with you, vet it with the community, receive and respond. So that is my formal presentation for the evening. I know there are questions and discussion, so I'll yield for that.
Question? Jason, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I had a question. So the plans that have been presented to us, of course, we'll, as a board, we'll look at the plans and may come up with an alternative option to present to you as well. Based on you as the consultant, which option are you recommending that meets our student success, our teachers, and overall reduction in our facilities portfolio, while also taking that same money and reinvesting it simultaneously back into our schools?
If I had to, I am a consultant, not in your shoes.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
So caveat. Somewhere in 2 and 3 is where, in 2 and 3, the differences are minute, right?
Correct.
I'll tell you what I don't recommend, I recommend anything that moves you forward at this point. I would recommend, you could implement any of these options. The fourth one has some real complications where you're squeezing some schools pretty tight. There are outlets moving pre-K to Larchmont. You could do it, right? I think that options 1, 2, and 3 in general fit together and make a lot of sense given the totality of the data. But at the same time, you could absolutely do the fourth one or some minor variation thereof. All I would say is if you're looking at alternative suggestions, again, it's pull the thread. If we're moving these kids into the school, can they fit? If they don't fit, where would they go? Is that too far? What's the already plans to put students in that school? So if there is another option or two, I'd like to be involved in helping support that decision-making with some of the data and present back to you, at least if not formally, informally, just to be able to help make sure that those are, the plans will be implementable. But the short answer is, I would recommend any of these options that move you forward that you believe you can implement with fidelity. I lean towards the earlier ones, but I recommend any of them.
Okay. Follow-up question I had, so on option 4, you're looking to close Lindenwood, relocate the students to Monroe, repurpose the building to a professional development center. So Lindenwood, it can't be renovated under no conditions to meet the current needs of our community there, so we don't have to close that school. Because if, on one it's saying close, the other one just professional development center.
So it is.
We have to use money.
So that is I'd say a supporting notion, a supporting idea to the plan. You can take it or leave it in terms of what Lindenwood would become after a school. It is an idea to make a PDC there. In part, it's a really nice property right there, right?
Absolutely.
Right? The challenge has been enrollment, building, like the overall resource challenge that you have. And it's not just Lindenwood, as you know, obviously, right? And so you could close that and turn it back over to the city, or you could close it and try to find another district use for it. You can make it habitable in terms of condition for some time. Is it the most educationally adequate school for the next 20, 30, 40 years? I don't think so. But could it be useful for a good investment for another purpose? Possibly. So I would say let's distinguish between primary and secondary movers. I know that school consolidations and reception are the primary movers, and like the afterlife of what it could be else is sort of a secondary matter that you could take up as a part of this process or even defer and tackle separately.
Dr. Poe.
Just to add to it, Mr. Inge, you know, one of the facilities that a division of our size is missing is a professional development center. So we have to rely on budgeting for hotels and different conference centers when we want to do something large, especially during the school year when all of our buildings are inhabited with students. So this would give us opportunity to have a center where we could do things during the school day or soon after school when we have a facility to do that. So the professional development idea is really the administration's idea to think about, you know, that the school is really set up ideally. It's not a large school. There's enough classrooms to do small group learning. The cafegimatorium is divided already, so there's a divider, so we'd have a smaller or, you know, a real large space or two moderate-sized spaces. So there wouldn't be a lot that would have to go into it to facilitate professional learning in the building.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not against our teachers.
Right, absolutely.
Making sure they get professional development. I encourage it because we need to have that have our teachers in our classroom.
Absolutely.
I just need to get a rationale and understanding to why we were doing what we're doing.
It's a very valid question, not to pile on,
Absolutely.
but to say, well, why couldn't it be a school? Why could it be a professional development center if not a school? And a lot of it has to do with that sort of the resources per student, where are we putting our money in adults in space or in kids? You know, and so the sort of the macro level picture, you could sustain a Lindenwood of its size in a division of your size, but when you have 6, 8, 10, 12 schools that are really underutilized, it's a different matter.
Ms. Basine, did you have a question?
Yes. So I have several, but I do want to start and say, you know, I appreciate the dialogue that we as a board have had over the last couple months, and Dr. Pohl, I appreciate the openness that you've allowed for us to have, you know, greater discussion one-on-one too. I do have several questions, concerns that you've already heard, you know, you've heard, but I still have some unease about. But before I get into that, so, you know, you talked about a boundary plan.
Yeah.
You know, piggybacking off of what Mr. Inge just said, I'd also like to see a repurposing plan as part of this, because
Very
there
valid.
may be, like Lindenwood for professional development, but there may be buildings that we want to keep in our portfolio for, we could have a boost in, we could have population growth once people hear how wonderful our school district is because of the opportunities, people may want to move here. It's just, or we may, like, at the crux of this are, and this is kind of where I want to bring it forward, is our board goals is academic achievement, improving student outcomes while honoring the non-negotiables that we've set. And with that is that every one of these opportunities needs to be a trade-up for every student. It cannot be, them getting less than what they've had, which, we've talked about for years, that's always been part of this, like a guiding principle, right? That it's a trade-up. Enhanced learning opportunities. That's what we've gone out to the community. We've told them that this is, through this process, we're going to be able to use the resources to enhance the learning environment for every student. And for me, what I need to see is, like, I need to see that. Like, I need.
What's a dollar amount?
Yeah, like for each of these each of these options, like one of the things I guess I was hoping for or expecting was also an impact, like projected impact, right? Like for each of these scenarios, so you have the closing school, you have the receiving school. I know it sounds like the boundaries will dictate exactly what the final, I want to say the merged school would look like, or, right? And while we're expected to vote on a list right now, through that boundary process, which may not be complete till the spring, some of our families may not, it's possible that some of these things can change. So I want to know, to what extent will things change? What are things going to, what is this going to cost? Because going back to these options, you mentioned option 2 as being the most realistic, given I think the financing.
More realistic, so on a timeline perspective, it is more realistic than what I initially drafted as option 1.
Right, and then you also mentioned like the financing available.
Yeah.
Right, so it's, what are these different scenarios, like what is the cost, what is the savings, what is the cost of moving school A to school B? Closing, what is the net gain from that, and how will that gain be used to enhance the resources at the receiving school?
Okay, so, yes, that is the right focus for how to do this well. And one of the things I've tried to say time and again is that a plan of this nature can be done very poorly, or it can be done very well. And the model suggests that on average, conservatively, you could gain about 1 million in operational savings from an elementary closure, 2 from middle, 3 from a high. Now, we're not talking about highs, we're not talking about middles. So really, we're talking about $1 million per school.
Per year.
Per year. Okay, and that is fixed staff, fixed operations of a building. So I would say that is your azimuth, that's your guide, your direction. But let's aim for about $1 million on average, and we'll, 780, 1.2, you'll see what happens, right? And what I think is important to know and to remind the constituents, your constituents about this, and in the community as a whole, is a plan of this nature can set the table for those reinvestments. The plan to make those reinvestments is the work of the administration to follow on this heel and say, okay, you've decided this is the board's direction for the plan. As Dr. Pohl said, that, there, in his opening remarks, there will be some assurances for how funds will be accounted for and strategies for reinvestment shared publicly, and to follow that, because that is the necessary focus. And so I would say a couple things. 1 million per year is your planning number, and you aim for that. And the data supports that. 2, when you take off the capital needs, the total deficiencies of this plan, at least in the first options, you're deducting $211 million off of your total deficiencies of $900 million. Okay, so that just takes that off, which allow the subsequent investments to go into, to the remainder of the need and not be diluted even further. So that's on the cap side. So let me see if I addressed your question. One, operations $1 million per. Two, the capital's 211. The redistricting. So in a boundary, this is an example where if you look sort of that thundercloud northwest of Granby there, of that population is divided in 1, 2, 3 different school boundaries around that sort of the density of students there. And all of them south of Granby are counted in Granby. And so the actual student data of, who's going to go to Suburban Park, those students that are higher up on that boundary are going to be the ones who go to the new school on Suburban Park. The ones down south are going to go to schools, more proximate to them. When we get into the redistricting process, that's why, so that large boundary will be wiped off the map and replaced with smaller segments that make geographic sense based on what the population is. And we can do much more nuanced planning and analyses of who would go where, based upon smaller catchments as opposed to these large catchments.
Right. But to your point, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Pohl, you wanted to.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Basine and Madam Chair. I just want to add as well, so when we talk about building school closures, we talk about each of the elementary schools has a reading and a math specialist. So if we close 5, that gives us 5 reading specialists and 5 math specialists to place at schools of higher need. So because right now we're budgeting, we're skin of our teeth able to budget for 1 per school of each of those right now. The instructional coaches that we have 10 instructional coaches that we're able to place in schools. We could even transition some of those to those positions. The administrative positions, each of the schools has a principal and an assistant principal right now. Those positions also could be, redesigned and rethought on how are we supporting our students where we need the support more. Right now, we have to place them where they are. We don't have any choice because we have to have them in our schools. But this allows us some of the flexibility with that. Also, with cost savings, being able to look at staff salaries and making sure that we're the most attractive division in the region so that we can fill all the spots. Every school has a school counselor that we're looking at. Those counselors could remain as counselors and move to different schools, or those positions could transition to psychologists or social workers and give support where we need that. So all those are in the play right now. And as we start to look at the rezoning, redistricting, and saying, okay, where does our data say we really need this support? It gives us the flexibility to move that support that we just don't have right now. And then long-term, if we continue, I said earlier, right now, 10-day count to 10-day count, we're nearly 700 students shy of where we were last year. Financially, that will have a mark on us, because we get a per student, when we do the ADM and everything, we get funding per student from the state and from the federal government. So, we need to think about those as well. Later, we won't have the funding that we have now if our students continue to decline. So that I understand, Ms. Basine, you and I, we've had the discussion as well about this. It's part of the greater planning, which is why I think the first assurance that we put on the list was that we would map and track where the finance is because of that. Because it's important that we know, we're not shuttering buildings just so we can build a big purse in the background, right? We're shuttering buildings so we can spend that money more wisely for our students who need it more.
Right. And I do want to say, I really appreciate the assurances document that you created to kind of map out what those would look like and all that, and I know that's also a work in progress as we continue the planning. But Mr. Sturts, I wanted to get back to the cost of this. So you mentioned, we could expect about $1 million per year based on the data you said.
$1 million per year per school.
Per year per school, per closed school, right?
Correct.
Right. Can you expand on what data you're using to get to that number?
That
Or
was-
is that from research or just?
That was your data in 2022-23.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's where that came from. At the time, it was like 787 per elementary, 1 point, something, 9 for
Okay.
middles, and close to 3 for highs. So just using general inflation order of magnitude, just easy math, 1, 2, 3. And the actual numbers will vary, but that is a good sort of planning number in your head.
Okay. So in your experience, though, because that number, that's where I thought you got it from that report. 'Cause
Right.
I do recall that. But when you start factoring in, as Dr. Pohl just mentioned, the needs of the student and the actual resources and potential retrofitting of school buildings to accommodate, for instance, younger populations or different populations, have you done any preliminary calculations to really kind of determine what that looks like?
So I would first take off, for the most part, any sort of capital investment considerations. Because on the net, they're pretty de minimis relative, for example, even a PB Young to a Ruffner, you do have to put in some tiny toilets and tiny sinks, right?
Right.
You do. And so that is an investment. And that would be based on, hey, we don't really want to have a K-8 over here, but you're going to be a 3-8, but you're going to be a K-8, and you're going to be a small K-8, and you're going to be a large K-8. Like, maybe we're going to have K-8s or not. So that would be an investment decision on having a K-8 or not. Outside of that, there's really not a capital equation to consider in the rest of the consolidations. In terms of, the staffing needs and so forth, I think that actually speaks to part of the point. A lot of the reason we're here is that extra $1 million per school being spent on administrative and support positions when you really need them in direct student positions.
Absolutely.
And that would be part of the plan to come. And I would say it really has two. Number one is what you all are talking about right now is the direct student investment plan. Number two is the school repurposing. What are we doing with these properties, for the long haul in the community? Best to do that with the city. It'd be great to do that with the city. But yes.
So you're saying, I like how you called it, the student investment plan, what that looks like. We will have that to look at as part of this planning process. I guess that's what, once I know the boundary planning is done and you have a more, definitive number of students and where they're coming from, and their needs, you will be able to craft that
Correct.
piece, right?
So sorry to interrupt, for the voting purposes on what option?
Yeah.
No, we wouldn't be able to say that yet because we wouldn't have the deep depth of information. But by the time, Mr. Sturts comes back and we have, all of the other data and information, then we'll be saying, okay, this is what we're going to phase as well. And the first phase may just be, we're going to, if a whole school is moving wholesale, those supports are going to move with them at first, just to help with that early transition. But part of that will also be the planning discussion at the building levels too, about the needs and to make sure that we're meeting the needs there too. So that would all be taking place this year. And then remember, this is a multi-year plan. Each year, we're responsible for doing a public hearing on the specific schools that are closing the following year. So each year, we'll be relooking at those plans as we move forward.
So I have a couple more. So about the boundary plan.
Yep.
then. So through that process, are you also looking to the board to have guiding principles that will dictate how that goes? Because, over the years, the guiding principles, we had a solid set of guiding principles for this work. And, they've kind of morphed over time. But, two real key pieces of it, were about creating socioeconomically balanced schools.
Right.
And that every opportunity is a trade-up.
Yep.
Right? And so
Right.
that to be at the forefront, and that we're honoring the non-negotiables that we set, which is basically those two things would happen if we're honoring those non-negotiables, right? So, as part of that, I guess my other concern is, I mean, I guess I want that commitment, you know?
You have mine, from our team.
Because
Yeah.
for me, like, that's where I know right now, it's like having the list, we're then doing the boundary plan, whereas, you know, you've heard me ask this question lots of times about why don't we have the boundaries on the front end and looking at that as
Bless you.
part of this plan. And I guess I want that assurance that every opportunity is, you know, we're creating equitable opportunities for our students and that it's a trade-up and that, you know, and I hear what you're saying about what you had said, you know, during the presentation about there are some things that we may not be able to change because of, you know, historical
Right.
segregation that exists in our city, right? But within that, what opportunities can we create
Yes, ma'am.
at those schools that would then allow for, you know, choice options or, you know, people to have access to different learning opportunities? Because that was, again, back to that core, that guiding principle that we used to have about creating, that was not just about neighborhood schools, it was also about creating opportunities. And so that needs to be, you know, has to be considered and not just say, you know, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but we hear it all the time that this is, you know, historically set up this way, or cities set up this way. In order to get, you know, really integrated schools, we have to, you know, redraw, you know, boundaries and all of that. But there are opportunities that we can take to make that
100%.
happen.
100%.
And so I want us to be like bold and do those things as part of this. I mean, this is on the same, you know, while it's scary, it also it can be exciting because of the opportunities that's created, but we have to be really intentional about it, which is why I keep bringing up the board goals. I keep bringing up the non-negotiables because I want us to be really intentional about what's ahead of us, you know, and the opportunities that are ahead of us. And so I'll say that, and I'll let others ask questions. I can come back, but that's.
If I may, like, I just would say you absolutely have my commitment and my team's commitment that board goals are are the framework upon which we're creating boundaries. We work with, my boundary team, I do this kind of planning. My boundary team does that kind of planning. Like, they're really good at that, and the person who leads that's fantastic. And she, you know, doing this in so many different boards, at least at the top line, a lot of boards have very similar guiding lights and guiding principles. Not all the same, but there's a lot of similarity out there. And so, like, those non-negotiables are there. And then there's also those things that will be in tension with each other. And sometimes those non-negotiables can be in tension, not necessarily that there's no path out, but they can be in tension. And we transparently will present those to you and talk through those and provide options that, you know, emphasize different of those criteria for you to look at the pro cons and make an eyes wide open decision. So you have our commitment on that.
Mr. Inge?
Yes, so I do want to echo many of the same sentiments my colleague Basine has echoed to you. I guess we have the options in front of us. We know the cost on certain things. We know how much it is going to close to elementary school, about $1 million, you say, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know how much the state pays per pupil. We know that we decrease the population and student population, correct? All right, and then we also know, well, you wouldn't, I mean, you're not Norfolk, but us here, we all understand that we know that additional tax revenue should be coming in within the next year or so, because by law, referendum, the casino has to be built in operation, and about, I think, 29 cents for every dollar comes to us for education.
Yeah.
So I need to see numbers. So I see schools closing, but these have people, families. I need to see a little bit more data, you're telling me to vote on just a plan without the transportation plan, without the repurposing plan, without an agreement from the city to say, hey, we can have a school investment fund if they sell the property and we don't retain that property. It's not something that you may not have to do, but I have not seen a lot of that from the administration side either. Not discounting you, Mr. Dr. Pohl, because you have been very transparent in previous administrations, and I applaud you for that. But I just wanted to just get more understanding. So will any of that information be available and ready by the time this board votes?
So
Because this is a generational thing, and I mean,
it is, you know, there won't be, we wouldn't have time or resources to do zoning and transportation plans for all
Understandable.
4 options.
Okay.
So that would be off the table. As
Okay.
far as the financing side, you know, it really comes down to, you know, each year's data. You know, I appreciate you understanding I'm trying to be as transparent as possible with everything. And even with presenting data over the past years, you know, when we look at our data, we try to place resources where the data says it needs to be. So if we did a full-on plan of this is where we're going to do stuff, and then in 3 years, the data says, well, you don't need it here, you know, I don't want someone to say, well, we had this expectation that this is coming, and now I expect it to come, but the data says it really needs to go over there. So as we go year by year, you will see planning of this is how this is going to change the division. This is how it's going to support our students. This is why it's so important for us. And I know this is a big ask, and this was thrust upon us as a division, you know, to the way we're looking at this with you know, the 10 schools and everything else. However, we also realize if it wasn't thrust upon us, like Mr. Sturt said, the worst thing to do is table it and table it and table it, because then we're not doing anything to fix it. And I think it's I'm equally as anxious as excited as I am about it, right? Because it is an opportunity to truly create this change. But at the same time, it does seem like we have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. But the leap of faith that we're asking at this point is because we know that the schools that are on that list conditionally are the ones that we won't want to be operating in 10 years, and we don't have the money to put in them in this time frame to make them more operational. So, you know, to that point, the planning, I'm not sure. The city side, as far as the repurposing of the buildings, we can certainly request and say this is what we would request, but beyond that, we don't have a lot of control. Now, I think, you know, when we get, because we've talked about a joint meeting, when we get to a joint meeting, that can definitely be a topic that we talk about. And I know we're asking for a leap of faith, you know, with the research and everything else that we put into it, you know, with these 4 plans, but know that what this came down to, starting with our committee, when they looked at all the data and everything, was these schools will not be strong operational buildings without a lot of investment in the future. So that's what we're looking for, is this acceptance to say, yeah, we understand as a board, these are the buildings that we need to take off of our roles. And then each year saying this is how we're doing it. Because each year, even though we get a list, each year, even this year, before we can possibly close whatever amount of buildings that we're going to close, we have to have a public hearing. And we can't go into that public hearing blind. That's why we've already, you know, elicited Wolpert to help us in the next phase of the zoning and everything else. And by that time, we will have the answers of, okay, if we're closing school A, B, and C, these are the resources that we know will have extra, and this is how we see them being dispersed into next year, because we'll also be further along the year data-wise. And you have my word on that. I know it's not everything you've asked for, but
So, Madam Chair, so I guess what my reservations is coming is, no, first off, let me say this, I agree. Yes, this is something that should have been addressed a while ago. We've kicked the can down the road, and it should have been addressed, and now we're here. And we have to make this decision that will upheaval some families. It would not be good for some, it will be but good for others, but for the greater good of every single person in Norfolk Public Schools. But what I'm seeing is I just have a list of buildings. I just feel like as a school district, why are we not talking with city to get financials for a certain, let me just, for an example, I want to go back to for the tax revenue for the casino. We're going to use that as an example. City manager, we know that by November, hey, we got to have everything in place, the casino has to be built, then money is going to come in. That, we may not know what that money is right now. However, they have market analysis to determine how much a casino would bring in, and we get 29.55% of that gaming revenue. So there should be a number that's there to say if we're closing the school of $1 million we're saving, we're also getting additional money there. And if Tarleton is one of the schools that we're closing, it doesn't say we're repurposing, so thus we're giving it back to the city. And if that's the case, what's the assessed value of that land? And that land, if it's going to be sold to a developer and the city's not going to use it for its government purposes, then can that money on conditions in collaboration with the city go into a capital improvement fund to reinvest back into our schools?
Go ahead, Mr.
Can I
Farley.
address that?
Yeah.
All right, the city does do that. So when we give a property back, and
Bless you.
the city redevelops it, then it goes back on the tax rolls, and we get 29.5% of that. All schools are owned by the city of Norfolk. We don't own the schools. So their view of it is that when we return a property to them, they may raise the building and develop it. I'll give you an example. If we give them back Chesterfield, they have every intention of finishing the Broad Creek project. It'll be filled with homes. Real estate valuation will come back to us at 29.5% of that particular tax base. So the city's view on it is when you give us back these properties, we are reinvesting, but they own them. We don't own them.
And I guess we should be, maybe in my opinion, this is my opinion as a board member, let me not speak for the board. We just got buildings, we should at least have some raw numbers that go along with this for us to think about.
Well, the city uses them as assets, like if they do a
I'm
loan,
just talking about raw numbers here on this plan.
well, they don't generally release them to us because that's their asset and they use it how they need to for loans, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we were both asking for similar things.
Close the school is
Like-
saving $1 million.
Right.
So, but if that's option two, how many schools are closing times how many elementaries times $1 million?
Right.
Why is there no dollar amount? That's what I wanted to see, like,
So that,
For
yeah.
each of the options.
yeah, for each one of the
For each of the options, so the basic okay, so I can give you at least a
That's what I was
top-line planning number, and that is, again, that's say it's $1 million to school, which is a good planning number, right?
I don't want you
So-
to give me a number. I would rather for you to go back to make sure you go to the board and then come back with a good number. I don't want you to throw nothing off the top or just estimate.
Yeah, I hear you. Like, so the work that we did in 22-23
Okay.
on what are the fixed costs in Norfolk tied to schools by building on average?
Okay. Option one, how much would you?
So across any option, right? So this is before we had options in 22-23. We were around 800,000 in fixed costs per elementary, around 1.7 something for middles, and close, like 2.7 something for highs. So if you sort of forward that up a little bit with the costs, the raises that have incurred since then and that kind of thing, from a good planning number is about 1 million per elementary school. On average, are the fixed costs in Norfolk of people and heating and cooling tied to the average smaller elementary school.
Gotcha.
So that number really is is something you can add to any option to get a pretty good number of what can be both reinvested. And in the first three options, you are closing 10 schools, so that's 10 million a year, 100 million over 10. And then the last one, you're closing 9 schools. And so again, that's where I said earlier, these options are doable. You can and will find savings. It is up to the administration under Dr. Pohl's leadership to sort of identify those specifically and reinvest them. But the homework done in 22-23 says that they're there.
Gotcha.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then one other kind of point I did notice in preparation for this, and if this is helpful, when I look back on a 10-year horizon in 2014-15 at your budget, overall operational budget at the time, It's 317.6 million.
Sounds about right.
We had 31,700 kids. That was 9,996 a kid, $10,000 a student. When you deduct Maury from the last budget, you get 523 for 26,278. That's 19,899. That's 20,000 a student. So the cost per student in the 10-year period, the investment per student has doubled. Now, inflation is a part of this, right? It doesn't count for all of it. But sort of like what I see in this is you have increased by 100% since 2014 the expenditure per student. But there's a lot left to be done.
Absolutely.
And so I think when we look at sort of where the numbers come from, you know, where do we have, what are planning numbers that we have, you know, I am confident that, you know, in that about $1 million per elementary school, sometimes it'll be a little less, sometimes it might be a little bit more, is a good, solid number based on the homework we did prior that you could use moving forward to help address some of those resources. And then the other things, like you're talking about additional tax revenue, casinos and that kind of thing, can help, you know, supplement, hopefully not supplant that, right? But given what we know, we don't know when all that's going to occur, and I've been around enough development, and I'm sure you have, to know that development can get kicked for 5, 10 indefinite years. But what do we know? We know that when we were doing this plan, in terms of transportation and cost efficiencies, we were hammering with the steering committee, and they were very faithful to, we want our long-term schools near where our kids are today. Because I don't know what the transportation plan is going to be, but if I know that if I am faithful and our team is faithful to putting schools near where the kids are today, I know that I'm setting the table for transportation efficiencies. I can't create that plan for you right now, but I can set the table for that. And I think that's sort of, you know, in framing what we're doing right now, we are setting the table for that success. That, as Basine and Dr. Pohl were talking about, there is excitement, nervous excitement about what can be done now with that. The nervousness is, it has to be done well. Like, that leap of faith is really in yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's got to be done right.
It's got to be done right.
Expecting to see some more numbers. That was it.
Yeah.
But
Same.
we'll talk more.
I have a couple of questions. Looking at the plans between option 2 and option 3, I see in option 3, we don't close PB Young till 2027. In option 2, we close it in 2026. Are there, and I'm trying to, what other significant differences do you see between the two options? I don't see anything
No,
really.
it's just flipping the Lindenwood and PB Young schedule, that's it.
Okay.
And again, those are fairly interchangeable, and
Well, yeah.
in terms of, you know, just sort of, it doesn't impact too many dependencies. You could do it either way.
Okay, well, the reason I just wanted, because that's what I saw, and I just wanted to make sure that I
That's right.
wasn't
It's
missing.
very nuanced.
I didn't miss anything, because I do prefer option 3, because that gives Ruffner another year to work on their climate and culture to get ready to become a K-8 versus a 3-8 school. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing
That's what you're
anything
seeing,
else.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Could I add, so I wanted, since should be, as a board, talking about this, so the other consideration to that, though, is looking at what's going on in the community, like what the plans are for the neighborhoods around it. So when I went back and looked at when the demolition plans were for Young's Terrace and Calvert Square, that's expected to begin in 2027. And there are lessons learned, what we saw with Tidewater Gardens and Tidewater Park, having students basically watching their neighborhoods. You know, it's like, do we want our students to be in the center of that when that's happening? Or, you know, and if there are updates from the city about when, you know,
Mr. Fraley has some.
I work with NRHA,
Okay.
And the reason we flip those is because that's in line with their demolition schedule. If we waited in option 3, Chair, if we waited till that time to close PB Young, it will be as the demolition gets to that stage of the development.
Okay,
And that's why we just flipped that.
okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
There was a reason for that. I'm working with the NRHA on that.
okay.
For the flip to delay it, or the other, you're talking about option,
So one has Lindenwood and one has PB Young. I
Right.
think 2 is Lindenwood first, PB Young
Right.
second, and then 3 is just
It's
the
reversed.
okay.
It's,
And
There you
I might
go.
have said that backwards because I don't
Yeah, I
have it
think
in
it was
front of me.
backwards, but yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
But the reason we did that is so that PB Young closed as the demolition got to that phase. I agree with you. I wouldn't want to have the school demolished when there's still a significant number of kids living close by. And that's why we made that.
And so we based off community feedback, we asked, what is the latest time frame that we could do that so that we could help with the transition?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because while I completely, that was my first thought, was like, okay, we have some time to really strengthen
Right.
the supports at Ruffner. Then on the flip side of that, I was thinking, what is, having community context be a factor too, and that is what is going on with the neighborhood. And so,
Option 3 is aligned with that.
thank you. Other questions? Colonel?
A board member mentioned the school investment plan with the city council. What is that? Is that another name for CIP or something else? Because I've not heard of that,
yeah.
Tanya, do you have,
Mr. Inge.
Tanya, were you answering?
Well, I was going to say, because we've talked about this, we've talked about what could be with the repurposing, right? So we know that we have a shared revenue formula with the city. But that can also be, per our policy, we can also go back and renegotiate what that looks like, right?
Right.
And then we have to look at where all the tax revenue is coming from. And maybe, what I've seen other districts do is, because I've been kind of researching to see what other districts are doing, is they have a school reinvestment fund
Right.
through their partnership with the city, that, through the sale of land, through the sale of the building or any economic development, direct investments beyond the shared revenue formula come back to the school division. Not necessarily for capital improvement, but for investments in resources, investments however we see fit, right? It could be capital improvements, but it could also be other resources, programming, whatever. So we've had, we shared that thinking around proposing that as part of this
Correct. Education is the
repurposing.
largest investment and the best
Yeah.
investment. So that was just seeing where the city gives money in the capital improvement plan that's appropriated to us through the city regular. But if they sell a property, then, hey, creating a separate fund, that would be something that we would have to agree upon as a board and a city council and say this money is going to go into the fund that will go back to invest in our schools. I understand that we get revenue because the property still goes back to the school. But when they sell it, they still make money off of it. So we need that money to go back to our schools and education.
And we did say that we wanted that. We did talk about it as a topic for a joint meeting.
Yeah.
So that's,
Okay,
That was it.
okay.
Did it provide clarity for you?
Does that answer your question?
Not quite, but I know there's more to it than what we, really, there's.
it's not something that currently exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not something that currently exists.
It's some, I had not heard that term before. We
Okay.
had not used it, so I'm still trying to
think
figure
you
it.
all referenced
But I
that, but-
also
I brought it up when
think
we
that
were
we
talking
need to
about a joint
concentrate
meeting.
on what we're going to be doing when we meet with the city council, and it should be sooner than later.
Yeah.
And we haven't come to that target date yet. And,
Okay.
And these are the questions, because we have expectations, and of course, the city council has their expectations also.
So I'm going to ask the board a question. In terms of the plans presented, knowing that we have to take action this month, do you have any thoughts on the plans that are presented?
To be honest with you, I have to
Yeah, I gotta digest
go
this.
look over that.
I gotta look over that.
Okay, I was just trying to take a pulse.
Yeah,
We need to come up with our own plan. We have more invested in our children than anybody else does. Well, I know I do. So I believe we need to come up with our own plan. We can look at the plans they have put together, but I really think we need to come up with our own plan.
Take this home and really read through it and,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I like how you have it all, the options, I appreciate it.
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted you to recognize me. So, no, I definitely need time to digest it, look over it, talk with my constituents, about it, see what is the best options for all of Norfolk Public Schools. Ain't no post on it right now, it's just, it's there.
That's completely
Yeah, no,
fair. I just wanted
But
to see
I
where
did
we
want to get
were.
a follow-up on, are we still getting the bus tours to go to the proposed schools that were closed as well?
Yeah, so and I'm not sure, I had asked Mr. Cloud about how we could organize that, how we could announce it.
Got it.
So we had made arrangements for this, actually tomorrow and Saturday, but we can push it back. We were trying to do a Thursday, Saturday,
Gotcha.
with, 1 through 5, then 6 through 10, then 6 through 10, 1 through 5. So if you do a Thursday easier, you can do both Thursdays or Saturdays. So we organized them, just waiting to see how we have to publicly announce that.
Other questions?
But I will say just one last thing. I definitely agree with Board Member Thomas on what she's saying. We need to look at these. If these don't work, we need to come together as a board, go into that room, and we don't come out until we make a sound decision that's going to be a solid investment for Norfolk Public Schools. And we all take accountability for that, because this is a generational change that we have to do in our city, and we've now been called to do it.
Any other questions for Mr. Stark? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Sturts.
Any further discussion? All right.
Do we have a
I'm
date
going to
for
suggest,
City Council
Madam
yet?
Chair, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute recess before we reconvene in 10 minutes. You have a question?
Well, so just want to be clear on our next steps regarding this. So we have 4 options that they've laid out for us. We also are talking about alternative options beyond what they've provided for us. We're going to need to have time to come together and discuss and work through what that is, what that looks like, what are some other things, assurances that we also want to have included, like come together as a board collectively to hash that out. And, it's either we are moving some of this to an October work session and delaying, or we are having an additional meeting in between now and when we're expected to currently take a vote.
I would say that we need to organize a special call meeting
Okay. So I
between
just-
now and when we are set to vote. Do we want to look at schedules right now?
Just send it out an email.
You want me to send out an email? All right, I'll send that out tonight.
we have next Wednesday, so that's a possible.
All right, let's tentatively say next Wednesday, but I will send out an email this evening to further. But I do think we need about a 10-minute recess before we go on to our next topic, so I am calling for that. Let's restart. We're moving on to agenda item 3.2, discussion of superintendent qualifications. Posted on board docs and sent to the board over the weekend is Norfolk announcement _2025_draft.docx. So if board members want to take a second to pull that up, you have it in your email or you can grab it through board docs.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Were there any changes submitted to you?
There's been no changes.
Thank you.
Okay, so it is posted up there. So this document, the VBSA gave us a draft document as sort of a guide to create our superintendent announcement. This document has been updated based on feedback from the surveys and our listening sessions, and was provided on Saturday to the board for review. I did not receive any comments or suggestions at that time, but I do want to make sure that we take an adequate look at this today. If there are any concerns or changes that need to be made, because I do need to send this or a version of this to VBSA tomorrow. I would probably, all this data has been updated on the first page, has been updated to reflect our current statistics. And, the information on the city is given, information about the division. I would probably say what we should focus on today is on the second page, the sections titled The Opportunity, the Qualifications, and also I took a stab at the residency requirement because I felt and believed, based on feedback from both the board and the community, that we feel very strongly that the person live in the city of Norfolk. So I will open it up for questions, comments at this point. If you have no comments, you can also say that, but if you like it the way it is, you can also say that.
I have no comment.
Just look, yeah. Seen it before, just looking over it again, just take a look at it.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I think you did, I read through all the feedback that we got, and I think you did a really great job at kind of, making themes and incorporating all, a lot of it, if not all of it, into the, I guess it's called the opportunity section. So I don't have any other changes to that.
Anything, Dr. Brown?
Nope, I think it's good.
No changes on my end.
And
No
you,
comment.
no more comments? Ms. Thomas, do you need another minute? Now, do we need a motion on this? Okay.
So I guess my only, go ahead.
I just had a comment. I guess, this is very small, where you have on page 1, under the division, you have courageous advocacy for all students, maybe data-driven personalized learning for all students, or,
That is data-driven personalized learning. You want to say for all students?
That's our mission statement that's currently.
oh, this is how it's,
Yeah, that's-
okay, then never mind, that's fine.
Yeah.
I guess it's the same for staff as well, right? So it's broader than students. Okay, I was just thinking out loud, thanks.
I know, I went back and looked at, it was the mission statement, so it was.
For residence requirement, I did put residency in the city of Norfolk is required within 6 months of job commencement to give them time to move to the city if they're coming from elsewhere.
That's pretty standard. I definitely agree with it. I mean, everything looks in order, Madam Chair.
All right,
Excellent job.
all right, so
Our next leader.
that was much easier than I thought it would be.
Just clarifying next steps. So after tonight,
It will
then-
be sent to Gina at VSBA,
Okay.
and the job posting will go up
You said
September
by
8th.
Monday. Okay. Okay.
And then we will get applications as they come in.
Okay.
And we are meeting with VSBA on October 9th. We have that in the timeline.
Right.
And so we'll go from there.
Okay, and do we currently, and I'm sorry, I didn't look to see, do we currently have a section on our website about the superintendent search where all the stuff is going to be posted, just so people know where we are in the process?
Is there a timeline?
There is a timeline.
There is a timeline. It is posted under board docs.
Yeah, and that
We can make sure that that gets posted on the website as well.
Yeah.
December 15th is our
I th-
deadline.
My recommendation is once we send this to VSBA, Madam Chair, once we send this to VSBA, we make sure that this is amplified out on all platforms, along with also the documents as well, so that so everyone knows that we're searching.
Okay. All right. Well, great.
With the timeline with it. I think that's just the biggest thing, just so the community will know where we're at.
Right.
And I'm gonna go get Miss Webb, just one second.
She's in here already. Ms. Tanner? Yeah.
Oh, hey.
All right, now I'd like to move on to agenda topic 3.03, Advantage Strategies Legislative Update with Ms. Emily Webb.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I do apologize, my allergies are acting up, but I have taken some Claritin today and hopefully we'll be able to get through this. So I know that you have these documents in board docs, but I do have hard copies for anybody who may want them.
Thank you.
All right, Oprah, you get a copy, you get a copy.
There are plenty of copies for everybody. I know I'm still old school and I have a hard time looking at documents for
It's
too
okay.
long on a computer. So, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you all. As we begin preparations for the 2026 General Assembly session.
We're good.
Oh, you good?
I know that school just started and January may seem far off, but we do have a lot of work ahead of us between now and then to prepare for the 26th General Assembly session and to work with the Norfolk delegation as they also prepare for the 26th session. Let's see.
Is
Where
it
do
on?
I point?
Is it on the side?
Point towards me.
Point towards you.
Check it for.
It
While
is,
you're getting
it
that
is
straight.
on.
While you get that straight, I was talking with our alternative representative and had a conversation. So she does not know exactly what you do, and I think for them just now coming on, can you explain to them what your role is and how you support Norfolk Public Schools?
Absolutely. So I represent Norfolk Public Schools at the Virginia General Assembly and before executive branch agencies in Richmond. Oftentimes there are a number of different priorities that the school board wants to get across in Richmond. And they can't be in Richmond full-time. When session starts, it is either a 45-day or 60-day legislative session. And it moves very quickly. And although the board does come and visit from time to time, I'm there. Okay, perfect. I'm there to represent their priorities and their interest before the Norfolk delegation, to make sure I'm communicating back with the board what's happening in Richmond, because again, it does happen at a very quick pace. This coming year, it's actually a budget cycle. We have a biennial budget here in Virginia, and so there will be a new budget, and obviously there's been a lot of concerns around what the economic forecast may look like, and so I'm there to make sure that Norfolk Public Schools is adequately represented in front of our legislators. So, and happy to answer questions along the way as well. All right, let's see. So you do have 3 documents in front of you this evening, and they're also available in board docs. That's the 2026 legislative timeline with some important dates, a track changes version of your legislative program, and an outline of a 2026 legislative priorities document for your consideration. I will walk through each of those documents this evening and look forward to receiving your feedback on both the legislative program as well as the legislative priorities document. I will note you should have seen the legislative program before. That is not a new document. It's something you all have been working on over the last couple of years. And honestly is in very good shape. The legislative priorities document is a new document that we are going to be working with you all to put together to make sure that we are highlighting those top priorities. The program is the lengthier document. This is the highlights that we most want to focus on for you all in Richmond. So why are these documents important? They help me tell your story and help you tell your story with General Assembly members and executive branch agencies. And especially as we're going to be having a new governor, lieutenant governor, and potentially attorney general, it's going to be important that we help tell that story in Richmond. These documents will highlight the unique needs of Norfolk Public Schools and share the good work and progress that is happening here. We'll use them to provide a high-level update on your strategic plan and goals, and most importantly, they will clearly articulate your authority and the resources you need to meet the needs of your students and your community. So there are several important dates that I do want to highlight for you all. After today's work session, I will work over the next few weeks to incorporate all of your feedback into a final draft for approval at your October 15th meeting. You will receive that final draft by October 1st so that you have ample time to review in advance of that October 15th meeting. Following your approval, I will work with Dr. Pohl and the comms team here to make any final design edits that need to be done for that document so that we have it ready for your legislative event that you're going to host on November 13th. It's going to be really important that we have that document ready to share with them so that they understand the full legislative program as well as any priorities that we want to put forward. General Assembly members can begin pre-filing legislation on November 17th. So the event that you're going to have with them on the 13th is going to be very timely. I know that there's been some concerns in the past on the timing of that, and so we are definitely on the front end to get them this information in advance of that pre-file deadline. And then Governor Youngkin will be presenting his outgoing budget proposal on December 17th. Following his announcement, coupled with the Money Committee treats, which is the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee in November, we should have a good picture of Virginia's economic forecasts and the potential impacts that any federal decision-making is having on Virginia's budget. Because it is a budget year, the 2026 session will begin on January 14th, and it will be a long session, so it will last 60 days, which in the moment feels really long, but is really a very short amount of time considering they typically take up about 3,000 bills and have to do the biennial budget from scratch. Couple that again with a new incoming governor who will likely want to make changes to Governor Youngkin's proposed budget. It's going to be very fast-paced and a lot happening in Richmond. Any budget amendment requests are going to be due by 5 p.m. on Friday, January 16th. So that's something for us to consider if you all do have any budget amendment requests that we're going to need to get in. And then that next day, on January 17th, Virginia will inaugurate new statewide elected officials for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. As always, I will continue to update on any changes to this timeline or any new dates that will pop up. Fortunately, they have already put out the procedural calendar, so all of the timeline dates for when things are due with session are set in stone right now. Any questions? No? All right. So switching gears to your 2026 legislative program. As I mentioned earlier, thanks to your hard work over the last few years, with the guidance of Kathy Bircher and Lauren Gilbert, your legislative program is very comprehensive and in very strong shape. I don't have any substantive sweeping edits that I am suggesting. The proposed edits that I have suggested are technical updates to improve consistency, clarity, and flow. I've also removed or updated outdated language. And for ease of your review, I've also done all of those proposed changes in track changes so that you can easily see them. I will note that on page 6, under the equitably supporting every student category, I did create buckets. Previously, it was a very long list of legislative positions. And as I'm thinking about legislators who may be reading through this, oftentimes you have to figure out how to capture their attention really quickly. And so I did create buckets that categorize your positions within that category. And so hopefully those are helpful and, again, just kind of create some more clarity and flow of your positions. Additional edits will be needed to include a progress report on your strategic plan and outcome-focused goals. We have not started working with the Norfolk staff on that yet, but will over the next couple of weeks. And so those edits will be made in advance of receiving that October 1st copy for your 15th meeting. And so at this time, I am happy to welcome any questions or additional feedback regarding proposed edits or additions to the legislative program. I'm also happy to walk through it, again, because you have seen this before, and I am not suggesting any substantive edits. I didn't put every single technical edit on the screen, but happy to answer any questions or walk through that as you all think would be helpful.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this. I do really like the technical edits that you made to the program. My question is around, well, I have two questions really around the legislative priorities. So I noticed the support cap was not listed here explicitly. Like, is there, I guess, want to hear what your rationale is for that.
So obviously this year, there was some funding put towards the support cap. And so I believe what I did,
It's in the program, but yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's, so I have put together, and I will get to the priorities and kind of talk a little bit more about that, but for those priorities, I have put together what I think are going to be some of the hot topics that legislators are going to be, putting forward legislation on, putting budget amendments in, things that we think, either one of the gubernatorial candidates may support. For instance, talking about the 1% increase of sales tax dedicated to school construction and modernization.
Can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
That would be helpful. to have
Yes.
that up.
And if it's helpful, I'll go ahead and go through the priorities just to give a little bit more background there.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Take a swing at it.
Okay. So you may be wondering, why do you need a priorities document if you already have this comprehensive legislative program? And as I mentioned earlier, this document is going to highlight your top issues for this legislative session in a format that is clear, concise, and easy for legislators to review quickly during the fast pace of session. We will use this document not only to communicate with the Norfolk delegation, but also with key committee members, because, there are going to be committees that I'm going to be participating in on your behalf, such as the education committees, the finance and appropriations committees, where we are going to need legislators from across the state to make sure they understand what Norfolk's priorities are, as well as the incoming administration. And so this will serve as a focused, practical communications tool to ensure that your highest priorities are front and center in all of our advocacy efforts. As I mentioned, the outline here are suggested priorities based on anticipated legislation and areas of focus that we expect from General Assembly members this year, particularly those that could positively impact public education. But ultimately, these priorities are your priorities, and so I am happy to make any edits, additions, subtractions that you all see fit. And so with that, going back to the support cap, one of the things, and we actually got an update from the governor on where the budget stands right now in August, and hopefully you all received that update. Things are our economic forecast is looking better than expected, but we are still anticipating a fair amount of impact based on federal decision-making, especially around Medicaid cuts, and the state having to pick up some of those. And so, as I think I mentioned to you all last time I was here, I do think public education in general, not just Norfolk, but public education in general, is going to be on a little bit of a defense mode because of all of the competing priorities. It is also a re-benchmarking year, and so there's already going to be an influx of money, granted, delayed money, because we were in that two-year cycle, using two-year-old data. So, trying to balance what I anticipate as far as budget is concerned was one of the considerations I had. But if that is still a top priority for you all, we can certainly add that in.
I don't know. Dr. Paul, do you have thoughts on that? Let's see.
I mean, we've had it on there for a while.
We have.
I do like, Ms. Webb, I like the one-pager aspect that you're talking about, pulling out and making it, this is obviously what we want. I think, administratively, my recommendation would be that, give this group about a week with a document to be able to bounce back, a week or two
Absolutely.
to bounce back ideas on that, and
Giving them 2 weeks,
there
actually.
we go. But, I think, of course, I'm in support of it, but at the same time, I want to make sure that our top priorities and the board's top priorities are really highlighted. So if that's not in the top anymore, then that's a conversation we have. I think we keep it in our program, for sure, because it's an area we want to be, but.
And I'll also note that, as bills come up, if it's in your legislative program, I'm going to go advocate on your behalf. And so just because something may not be on the priorities document doesn't mean I'm going to be like, oh, well, it's not a priority.
Right.
It is still going to be something that we're focusing on. And so again, totally your decision on whether to put the support cap in. Again, there has been some progress made. They haven't gone to that prevailing practice methodology yet, which I know is something that we would like to get into the support cap to kind of have it fully be removed. But I do know the General Assembly has made investments, in recent years, and we hope to continue to make those investments because we know that they are very far behind where they need to be. Yeah.
Any comments or questions? So we all know what our homework is?
I'll go to next steps. So I would ask that you share any additional feedback or edits on the legislative program and the priorities document by Friday, September 19th. I can be flexible on that date a little bit, but don't want to get too close to that October 1 to make sure that I get that product in as final form as I can for you all in advance of your October meeting. Again, we'll circulate that revised final draft on October 1 so that you have a little bit of time to review it in advance of your October 15th meeting. And then we'll work with the team to finalize it if you do ultimately give your approval at the October 15th meeting. Right.
Very good.
Any questions?
I think we have
All right.
time.
Yeah, happy to answer student questions too. Okay. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to agenda item 3.04, policy discussion. Dr. Pohl.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Madam Chair, Mr. Calitero, Vice Chair, Ms. Thomas. This afternoon, there are a total of 12 policies being presented for your review, in addition to the 15 policies that are second reading. So I'm not going to go over the 15 again because those were reviewed at the last work session. So there are a couple I want to bring your attention to that have more than just minor language. They have or legal or cross-reference updates. So first is policy IGBAZ. This adds language to support updates to Virginia code. These updates include language added around post-secondary transition support services, support during emergency situations and evacuations, and parental notifications of dual enrollment rights and obligations. And this one, usually with student policies that have changes, we recommend them for a second reading, so this one's recommended for a second reading as well. The next one is JCFM, previously known with us as JXXX. It is personal electronic devices. This policy's been rewritten to align with the VSBA policy, the model policy for electronic devices. As most of the board recalls, we had to create our own policy for this when the law came into effect for January 1 last year. So this policy now aligns with the official law changes created and follows the same ideals as the policy created by NPS that was passed in January. And the regulations that are required they continue. They don't need to be rewritten because those are how we implement the policy, which is staying the same. KA adds language around regularly evaluating programs for maintaining open channels of communications and good relations with stakeholders. Although this is evaluated within the superintendent's non-negotiables, within the policy review committee, we did have discussions about revisiting how that's done and making sure that it's in line with our practices and in line with policy requirements, so that'll come in the future. KBA adds language to the requirement of FOIA training for FOIA officers within NPS, and this includes happening within a reasonable amount of time of when they're appointed, and then once every 2 years following their appointment as a FOIA officer. KGD, this is a new policy required by a new law on notifying parents and guardians of any school-connected overdose within 24 hours. It does clearly define school-connected within the policy, that if it's a field trip or an athletic event or a club or at school during school hours, that's how it becomes school-connected. KQ adds language required through Virginia code in relation to any partnership or sponsorship where they have direct contact with students. They must certify they have not been convicted of any violent felony or crime of moral turpitude. And if you remember last month when we went over that moral turpitude phase was in a lot of new policies, this follows that legal update as well. And then finally, LC, these are updates on the process of initiating, reviewing, and accepting a charter school proposal. So those are our major updates for this policy term, and we still have a couple more on the books that we'll be bringing forward that we're just doing a little bit more review on. So I'll pause it. Any questions or comments that you might have? And again, these are all VSBA recommended changes that are being put forward.
Dr. Pohl,
Yes,
could you restate which policies are going to be up for first and second reading?
So the only ones for second reading are JCFM and IGBAZ.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
My pleasure.
All right, we are now moving on to agenda topic item 3.05, future agenda items. I will open that up to the board. All right, the requested future agenda items. We do have the Virginia Literacy Act. Is
That's
that
all right.
correct? That we have already noted as a future agenda item. Is there anything anybody would like to add at this time or be considered? Okay. All right, agenda item 3.06, can I get a motion to go into closed executive session?
I move that we go into executive closed session.
Second.
Ms. Moore Buffalo has brought forward the motion, and Dr. Martin has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion prior to the vote? All right, Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Move that members of the School Board of the City of Norfolk go into a closed meeting for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of Section 2.2, 3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended. 4, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the school board pursuant to subsection 2.2-3711A1 of the Act. The subject covered by this exemption is the discussion of persons and personal actions, including for vote on today's personnel report, in consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation or regarding specific legal matters, requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel pursuant to subsections 2.2-3711A7 and 8 of the Act. The subjects covered by the exemption are consultation and briefing concerning school board policies and regulations prohibiting discrimination and the matters set above in subsection A of this motion. Basine?
Aye.
Buffalo?
Aye.
Inge?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Colson?
Aye.
Thomas? DeCalagero.
Aye.